Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining me on another episode of the Dorsey Show. Today, we have a special guest with us. His name is John Liddle. He is a news anchor, sportscaster, and singer based in Dallas. His podcast, called Where You're Going, is reaching people with the messages that where we're going is so much better than where we've been. John has seen his outlook on life changed drastically by choosing to get up and try again after the biggest setback of his life. John is also the father of three girls. John, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Absolutely, Dorsey. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, definitely. Can you give us some background on your story, where you grew up, how you got saved, and what you've been through in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been a Christian almost as long as I can remember. I was one of those kids that kind of grew up in church, and I did grow up here in the Dallas area, Louisville. It's a northern suburb of Dallas. And I grew up in a home where, you know, um, having a relationship with Christ, it was set up to happen, right? We were in church, that was encouraged. Definitely, um, eh, my parents had relationships with Jesus. Uh, I think I'm really grateful for that. But at the same time, my home life was very, very unbalanced. By the time I got to probably 8 or 9 years old, I realized my parents were not getting along very well at all. There was a lot of fighting, about, little things and big things in my home. I wasn't always aware of what they were fighting about, but I could tell that there was always tension. And that set off a series of events in my childhood, between 8 or 9 and until I went off to college, where my parents were very much on again, off again. Me and my mom and my sisters, I had four younger sisters, we all moved out, and then we moved back in, and we moved out again. And then it was my dad moving out a couple times and moving back, and it was always unsettled, and it was always just unsure whether my parents' marriage was going to make it. Eventually, they did get divorced, but wasn't until I was an adult. But it always felt like my parents were kind of divorced, right? And it felt like I was in a really unbalanced, uneven home. And even still to this day, there's a lot that I can't make sense of when it comes to my home growing up. And I've had to kind of let go of and say, kind of like, only God knows. And here's where I am right now. And let's keep marching forward. So, for me, being having a relationship with Christ was always encouraged, and I was trying to do that. I don't think until I was older and maybe even an adult, I truly understood. I truly understood what it meant to have a relationship with Christ. In that, I am fully forgiven. I am fully free. I don't have to feel the shame even when I do something I don't want to do, and that there truly is freedom in that relationship with Christ. And um, that's something I'm more fully discovering every day, and I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, I see the sign behind you. It says "Get up, make something new, go to battle." Where did you get that sign, and does that mean something to you? And what does that mean?
Oh, absolutely. It means a lot to me. So I'll have to take you through my marriage, which I kind of met what I felt was the love of my life at I was about 19, and a couple of years later we ran back into each other, and we ended up getting married when I was 23 and she was 22. And so I thought I had the world by the tail by marrying this girl. I thought it was, she's beautiful and she loved Jesus and it's everything that I wanted. But it was just one of those things where the marriage didn't go exactly like I was hoping it would go. About a year into my marriage, I fell into some addictive patterns that I had experienced earlier in my life and that I thought I was kind of over. Well, they reared their ugly head again, and I brought them to my wife and I said, "Listen, I've done this. I'm sorry. I don't want to do it." And she came alongside me and helped me, stood by me through recovery and things like that. But she did say, "John, if you ever do this again, I'll divorce you." And so about 3 years passed. We moved to Oklahoma for my work, and I kind of got away from my support system. And I started to slip back into those addictive patterns. And every time I thought, all right, I mean, this is the last time, put it away. I don't have to do this anymore. I would just go right back to it. And it got worse and worse. And I just kept hiding it from her because, she had said what she had said. I loved her very much. We were starting to have kids. I definitely did not want to lose my marriage. Um, and I loved her. But eventually, it just kind of took control and I lost hope. I never admitted to her that I was stuck in these addictive patterns, but you know, through us just not getting along, um, the pandemic type time of September 2020 really hit us hard. We were in financial trouble and we were fighting all the time. And she basically told me she wanted a divorce, and I didn't want that. And we went for about a week where I was like, no, I don't want this. Please, I'll try anything. And finally, a week later, she said, John, I don't know what's wrong with you. I don't know if you've been seeing somebody else. I don't know if you're struggling with addiction. I don't know what it is, but I just feel like I've lost you. And I said, no, I've never cheated on you, but I have been struggling with addiction. I've hid it from you for about 10 years now. And she said, yeah, okay, well, that's the final straw then. And, and the divorce proceedings started. And it was certainly the lowest time of my life, man. It was, um, you've got 3 kids at the time, getting kicked out of your house because of, you know, something you've done. And just that low moment of feeling so alone and so broken and not really knowing where to start in recovery other than I knew Jesus was the answer. I just didn't quite know how to get there. Right. And thank goodness for community. And I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but thank goodness for people that came along beside me during that time, because it really was a rapid change to go from September of 2020. I don't want to say things were good in our marriage, but that was the first time I knew that she wanted a divorce, to January of 21. That's when the divorce actually became final. And I fought for it the entire time. But, in there, I, at some point, um, you know, decided that I was going to get back up and that I was going to fight for my life, even if my marriage came to an end. And where this comes from is the story of David and Bathsheba. You may remember how, David was supposed to be out at battle, and instead he just hung back at the palace. He saw Bathsheba, took her, got her pregnant. Obviously shouldn't have done that, tried to cover it up by bringing Uriah back, trying to get him drunk and to sleep with his wife. So it didn't look like it was David's kid. That never happened. Finally, he basically has Uriah killed on the front lines of battle, right, to cover up his misdeeds. And it wasn't until Nathan called him out that David actually said, oh my gosh, yeah, you're absolutely right. I screwed this up. And, whatever Lord's judgment against me is just. And, God wasn't going to make David lose his life, but the kid that was going to be born to Bathsheba was going to die, right? That was going to be basically the judgment there. But David fought God on that. I mean, for 7 days while the kid was sick, David is crying and he is pleading with God, won't eat. God, please save this baby, just like I was pleading with God during that time of separation before the divorce was final. Please save my marriage, God. Please save my marriage. But what happens is when the child dies, when David and Bathsheba's child dies, the attendants are really afraid to tell him because they think he might do something drastic. But it's kind of crazy what he does, because what does he do? He gets up. That's the first thing he does. When he finds out the child's died, he gets up, he goes, he washes himself, and then he goes to the house of the Lord and he worships. And I learned something from that when the child died, David kind of accepted it, and um, it doesn't seem right in that moment that David would be able to get up and just say, you know what? All right, I fought for this thing, but I'm going to put it behind me. And not only did he get up, and worship God, he also made something new. One of the next verses is that he went and comforted Bathsheba, and and she became pregnant again. Who was that kid? It was Solomon. Solomon, who, eventually became the wisest person that ever lived and built the temple. And then what did he do? He went to battle. What he should have been doing at the very start of the entire story, he should have been out with his guys doing battle, like kings do. And so this has been my cry, since the divorce went final, is to get up. It's not easy all the time, but just keep getting up. Just because things didn't turn out like I wanted them to, like I thought they should, to get up, to make something new. I don't know what that is. Maybe the podcast. It's a lot of different things over time, but just to keep making something new along the way. Maybe it'll be a new relationship that God will bring me down the line. I don't know. And then to go to battle in every area of my life. I was falling down on the job in this area of addiction, and it ended up ruining my marriage, making my marriage come to an end. So I'm not going to do things like that anymore. I'm going to go to battle in that area and every area of my life where God shows me, hey, I love you, but I've got more for you here. I want to go to battle in those areas. And so that's why that poster's up there behind me. It has meant a lot to me over these last 2.5 years since the divorce.
Right. Now, as I read in your bio, that you're a news anchor, sportscaster, and singer. Um, do you do all three of them today?
What a great question. Yes, I do actually. Yesterday I did all three in one day. So my day job is as a news anchor for a news radio station in Dallas. We're not news talk, we're just news. And so think of your evening newscast or something like that, right? So we do news, we do traffic, and we do weather. And I'm a newscaster, a news anchor. And then, as time allows for me, as much as I can in the evenings, I broadcast ball games. That could be football or basketball or baseball or whatever the case may be, a lot of times through ESPN Plus type platforms for local universities. And yesterday, after my full-time shift, I did a public address announcing for the WNBA team here in Dallas, the Dallas Wings. And before that, I sang the national anthem for the game as well. So I actually got to do all three yesterday. But yes, I still do those to this day. And they all, kind of bring me joy in their unique ways. And I am really, really blessed to be able to, make money and also to just do these things that bring me joy on a daily basis, and hopefully it gives glory to God along the way as well.
Yeah. What made you get into all three of them in your life?
Yeah, I grew up as a ridiculously avid sports fan. I mean, more like obsessed. A sports nerd, I think, is what you would call it, because I had absolutely zero athletic capability at any kind of elite level. But I loved the games. I loved all of the stats. I watched everything. I listened to the sports radio station in town and became kind of obsessed with that. And I really thought that I was going to be a sports radio star down the line. That's what I was kind of hoping for. As I went through high school, though, I'd always loved performing, but that's where I kind of caught on. Like that's where all my friends were in musical theater, and that's where my best ability lied. And so I was in all kinds of shows and stuff, and I started to see that I had a real ability to sing and act and kind of make a fool out of myself sometimes too. And I actually went to college the first year at the University of North Texas. I was in the musical theater program. After a year of that, I was like, man, I like this, but I don't know if I love it. And in order to do this with the rest of my life, I'm going to have to love it because this is a tough road. So I decided to go a different route. I decided to go with one B, so to speak, which was getting into radio and the radio station there on campus. And I did everything. I DJ'd, I did sports. I was the sports director for the last couple of years. I was at the University of North Texas, and by the time I got out, I was pretty obsessed with doing sports play-by-play. So that's where the sports stuff came in. That's where the sports casting came in. I followed that path for a good, 10, 12 years. And then when I came back to Dallas, after I'd mentioned I was in Oklahoma for 8 years, when I came back to Dallas, I got a call from my old boss, and he said, "Hey, I've got a opening as a traffic anchor, broadcasting traffic on our station." And I started there, but they quickly moved me into news just a couple years later, and I've been there ever since. And I did not know how effective I would be at it. I don't know if I'm talented at it, but I am a pretty even keeled guy. I um, am not into politics whatsoever. I have no rooting interest there. So I think that really helps me, because I'm not going in there and I'm able to read the news and deliver the news with a lot of neutrality. Also, when things call for it with empathy, I'm pretty good at breaking news, and I'm really, really good at breaking weather events as well. So I didn't know I was good at all these things, but God has showed me that over the last 4 or 5 years, and then I still get to do sports on the side. And then I still get to do singing on the side, like national anthems. And I've gotten to sing for the Mavs and the Rangers and the Stars and like the Wings, like last night in front of former President Bush at a tennis
Oh,
event.
wow.
So, God's blessed that as well. So I don't know why I get to do all these things, but I'm really happy. I'm really happy I do, and that I can still do them all, even at 40 here.
Yeah. What is one thing, if you could, what is one thing you could change about all three industries that you do?
One thing I could change about them. I don't know if I'd change anything about singing. Maybe if I could change something about singing, we would have more Broadway style songs in the praise and worship space. Because that's what I'm best at is like Broadway style.
Yeah.
But praise and worship isn't really Broadway style. So my voice isn't best suited for modern praise and worship. But I don't want to slow everybody's roll. I love modern praise and worship. I just wish I was better at singing it. Um Otherwise, in sports, I just wish it was more about the game and the people rather than all the ancillary things. Like we're starting to get into sports betting and stuff like that. That doesn't really um float my boat. I don't care at all, and I'm not like trying to be preachy against it. I don't even It's not even that. It's like I just don't care. I care about the competition. I care about the people involved. I care about telling stories. um and I think other than that, I'd love to see more games on TV. So I'd love to see that down the line. Specifically, women's sports. I think there's a lot of room for continued progression in advancing women's sports. And then on the news side of things, I, I don't I don't know, like specifically at my station, I'm pretty proud of how we are able to stay neutral and able to stay down the middle and don't, really lean one way or the other. I just wish, I wish more news organizations were like that, and we weren't trying to, win a ratings battle for, you know, um, either conservatives or liberals, and slant stories that way in order to win those rating battles. I think there are a lot of news organizations that are guilty of that, and I don't want to be part of that. And I wish that went away because I think that those of us in news, deep down, almost all of us just want to be in it in order to disseminate information, and entertain when it's necessary, but to keep people informed and safe and not scare them. And
Yeah.
so those are probably the things I would change about the industries.
Okay. Now you also have a podcast, and it's called "Where You're Going." Why did you feel that that was an important message?
Mm. I think it goes back to the get up, make something new, go to battle, because I, for about the last year and a half, I knew God had put it on my heart that I was probably going to do a podcast at some point from a faith based point of view. And I just didn't know how that was all going to play out. But a big part of my recovery over the last 2.5 to 3 years has been the belief that God is not done with me, that no matter what I've done in order for me to have a hope and a future, I have to believe that God believes in me, that God, and basically that he knows what he can do through me if I'm submitted and surrendered, right? It's not in my power, it's in his. And thus, I'm not done. My story is not over simply because my marriage didn't make it. And a good deal of it was my fault. That doesn't disqualify me from anything, anything at all. Helping other people, leading my kids the way I should lead them, having a fulfilling career that points people to Jesus, um, you know, any of it. Relationships down the line, it doesn't disqualify me from any of that. And I don't care what you've done, where you're headed, as long as you have obviously the right mindset. If you're I believe, and I know you believe too, following God, what he wants for your life, trying to listen to the Holy Spirit and take those small steps along the way. If you're doing that, where you're headed is so much better than where you've been. And people need hope. I remember I referenced it earlier, sitting on that hotel room bed, after being kicked out of the house and just like literally crying myself to sleep several nights because you feel like you've screwed up so bad. Um, not really feeling like the situation was unfair. I didn't feel like a victim. I just felt super guilty. I did feel shame and I felt alone. And I know there are people out there that feel that way, that feel like the world's done with them, or that maybe they even feel like God's done with them. And I know that that's not true. And I know I can speak for God because I know his truth. God's not done with them. And as far as the world goes, I mean, I know there are people like me that believe that there is worth left in every single person. I don't care who you are. And so that's what I hope to get people out of the show. And we do the people get out of the show, and we do that through different topics along the way. But just the ever evolving human experience is something that we try to talk about. I try to talk about mental health, true mental health, about forgiveness, about grace, about God's mercy for us, about relationships, and just how those things truly can get better. And our belief in that they will get better for people if they if they continue to walk forward.
Yeah, you mentioned it, and you said, for those that feel down and those that feel, like everything's just gone completely, you know, or exploded around them.
Yeah.
Like you were in that at that time in that hotel room. You mentioned, that God's not done with them yet, or even with you yet. What other encouragement would you give to people who feel like, giving up and feel like, everything's just gone to pieces around them?
Mm, what a great question. And I appreciate you asking that, and I take it very, very seriously. I would encourage people that I hope this is an encouragement that it will get better. Sometimes it gets a little worse before it gets better, and that doesn't mean it's not going to get better. Sometimes you have to dig a little bit deeper into, you know, we all want to find our why. Sometimes we got to figure out, okay, why am I here? Why am I sitting in this hotel room alone right now? Honestly, what did I do to bring myself to this point? And if I was the one that brought myself to this point, maybe I shouldn't be relying on just myself so much. Maybe I should look to, some advice that is a little bit above my understanding. Maybe I should forgive that person. Maybe I should, um, you know, just really attack that addiction. Maybe I should look back in my past and be like, okay, why do I feel like reaching for a bottle or reaching for food or reaching for pornography when I feel like avoiding? And when you take control of your life like that, when you truly start to understand yourself and why you do things, it gives, kind of you the power back. And I fully trust in God with my life and that sort of thing. But sometimes we can feel like really out of control. And I think God wants us to be emotionally mature enough to be able to look back into our past and say, okay, what's the causality here? Where did the dominoes start falling and what does it trace back to? And let's retrace these steps and do something different. And when we do that, again, it gives us the power back, the power to take steps. And instead of reacting to situations, we are, taking the bull by the horn, so to speak, and saying, no, instead, okay, I feel like this. I'm going to make a different decision. I'm not just going to react the way I've always reacted. And so I think it's just one of those things where you're in the situation and you're feeling hopeless and you're feeling like a screw up. It makes absolutely no sense. But when you dive into it, it can start making sense. I would also say that there are people in this world. I promise there are people in this world. And there are a lot of people when they come to the end of the rope like that, they don't trust people anymore. That there's so many people in this world that have been where you have been and they have made it out. And then it's kind of like the pay it forward thing, or, we want to help. I want to help people on as massive a scale as I can to know that there is hope. And anybody that reaches out to me, I want to respond, take them by the hand as long as God would have me do that and help them take that next step. And I know there are millions of people like me that want to help people who are in those circumstances. So you're not alone. You've just got to find the right community. And it's
Yeah,
not like a taking advantage of them type thing. It's just leaning on them for a little while and saying, I got to catch my breath and I got to figure out who I am. And people like me and people who have been through stuff, they understand and they want to help you through that too. So
yeah,
that's that some of the encouragement I'd give you.
right. And you mentioned community, and 30 years ago we a lot, most of the world, not even this country, but most of the world became isolated because we were shut down. We weren't able to go out. We weren't able to interact with other people for a very long period of time. How would you advise yourself and even others to come back into that
Hmm.
community? Break that break that isolation that we for so long we got used to.
Yeah, the first thing I would say is you don't have that excuse anymore. Thank goodness. You don't have that, um, you know, uh, th- that that very real issue to lean back on. Well, I can't do that because of COVID, and what I would say is, community works, man. Community absolutely works when you've got people around you who love you and you love them. It becomes this big circle where everybody feels valuable because they're giving inspiration to you. You are giving inspiration to other people and you feel valuable. I would also say that you can only be loved to the amount that you're known. If nobody knows you, then you can't be loved. And if you even go to some sort of community, whatever community it may be, maybe it's an AA meeting or something like that, and you just sit there and you never say anything and you just kind of take it in and then you leave and you don't meet anybody, you're never really known. How can you be loved? I mean, people can love you so much, but you can only be loved to the extent that you're known. And so getting into community and then being vulnerable and believing that vulnerability is a superpower that not only helps you, but it helps other people. It really changes lives. Things get done. Life change happens when more than one person is gathered. When when two or three or more are gathered in my name, God says, and I think that's prayer becomes more powerful then. But you know what? Just we rely on each other, and that simply our wills become more powerful. We're encouraged to have self control. We're encouraged to have patience. We're encouraged to take steps in our recovery or in our lives or in forgiveness. And when you're sitting by yourself, when you have a lack of community, uh, then the only thing that's playing in your head are your own thoughts. And they're cyclical, and it's hard to come up with any new ideas. Um, and it's hard to love yourself. I mean, if you've got that ability, more power to you. It's getting better in me too. But you know, um, you need those people. You need to love and be loved, and you need new voices in your life of people that really care about you. And that's why community is so key, and that's why it's been life changing for me because I had so many um, great men of God come alongside me in the last 3 years. Guys like Jeremy Baus and Eric Summerhauser and Colin Tobias and Ryan Johnson and Mark Moran, and I could go on of people that truly care about me, that check on me sometimes before I check on them, and I in turn have to be the one to check on them because they're in a little bit of a tough spot, but that's okay. We all get in those tough spots. One of the only ways we can dig out of it is with community, other godly people who really um, want to see each other improve and become more and more like Jesus. And so that's why community is so huge.
Amen. Well, John, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We greatly appreciate having you.
Oh my gosh, it's absolutely a pleasure. I love talking about these things, and I love how every single time I get to come on, I get to think about new stuff, and it's I'm definitely a work in progress, and I am happy to share as much as I can to just help other people who are works in progress take steps themselves.
Amen. If you could leave us with one last encouragement and piece of advice, we greatly appreciate that.
Hmm. I think one thing I'm learning is we're all kind of, a lot of times we get paralyzed by fear. You know, anxiety is fear. Depression at its root is kind of fear. Um, and the opposite of fear isn't bravery in my mind. Um, you know, the Bible says basically that the opposite of fear is love. Perfect love casts out all fear. How can that apply to your life? Well, instead of feeling like, man, I got to get all brave so I can face this day, I don't know. Maybe focus on love. What do you love? Who do you love? Um, you know, focus on God's love for you, and ask God to give you more love for him. And um, stop trying to worry about being brave all the time to counteract and counterbalance fear. Instead, concentrate on love and find love. And I have a feeling that if we were able to do that and rewire our focus, that would help so much with the very real anxiety that we're experiencing in this country.
Well, Gong, again, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Guys and girls, thank you so much for listening and tuning in today again. We love to encourage you to check out Gong's information and Gong's podcast. And until next time, please like, share, and even review this podcast on Apple Podcast. God bless. Have a good day. Bye bye.